Hello, welcome back to the channel. My name is Lisa Elvin Staltari, and I'm a genealogist and a passionate traveler. Over the last year or so, I've been featuring a series called Les Filles du Roi, or The King's Daughters. This is my latest series, Les Filles Mariées, The Marriageable Girls, and getting to know their stories a little bit better. Now, there are about 260 of them. We're on episode 12. We've got a long way to go. But before we begin, let me show you how you can support the channel. The first three keep you in the know. Subscribe, like, and notify. The next three ways are ways in which you can really help the channel expand and thrive. We have Coffee, Etsy, and Patreon. All are ways of showing your support. I really appreciate those of you who have shown me your appreciation. Let's get started, shall we? Now, the marriageable girls are the filles mariées that came from 1634 to 1662. It was not a state-sponsored thing. It was just kind of a organic, if you will, girls that would come across because churches would ask them, or they would have a contact in the New World, that sort of thing. It was a very informal program. So obviously, over 20, 30 years, almost 30 years, they had only about 260 girls kind of even come across, let alone the ones who didn't have children or didn't get married. So obviously, it was not enough to make the colony truly explode in terms of population. And so that is exactly why Les Filles du Roi, the program, was created. So les filles mariées came before, so they're truly the founding grandmothers of Quebec in essence. And so they were, if the filles du Roi were brave, these women were courageous beyond, I can't even imagine. Because you have to understand, from 1634 till about 1660, it was a pretty wild place. Quebec, as well as Trois-Rivières, which had just begun, was founded in 1634. So the fact that these ladies came to a place that wasn't even, in many respects, civilized is just an incredible, incredible act of bravery. So let's get to know one of these amazing women. Today's episode, Marguerite Maclin, and she is a viewer request. I did not find her in my file, so let's get to know Marguerite a little bit better. Maclin was born in 1646 in a commune, which as you know is township, called Cézanne-en-Brie, which is now only called Cézanne. And is found in the region of France, which you can see circled in the middle picture, the Grand Est, the large East region. And inside that region, it's near the Marne department. You can see it on the left hand. So it is actually really close to the Ile-de-France, which is part of the Paris and its suburbs. It currently has about 5,000 people that live there. So it's a fairly, big town, if you will. It's truly a medieval city and one that tourists flock to. It's been populated since the Gallic period. It suffered a great deal of damage during the invasions before the 10th century. It was then completely rebuilt, and there were castles and there are fortifications that remain. I suspect that by traveling here, you would be immersed in Marguerite's world and be able to see some things that she would have seen. Now, her parents' names were Nicolas Maclin and Suzanne Larose. Let's see her journey to New France. So upon the death of her parents, she did come to New France. She was housed because of her age, I suspect, and it appears that she may have intended to be a nun. So let's have a look at her journey. Now, Marguerite arrives in New France. She's probably close to 13 years of age. She is housed at the Maison Saint-Gabriel, and Marguerite Bourgeois, the founder of the Congregation de Notre-Dame Memorial, would have been one of her sponsors. She was by far the most influential woman in Quebec and certainly Montreal's history. Born in France, she was invited in 1653 to come to New France and establish a religious congregation and school by none other than Pierre Paul de Chamédy de Serre de Maisonneuve, the governor of the French settlement. She established that Notre Dame congregation and helped organize the church. The governor allowed her to use a stable as the first schoolhouse, and this in turn became the first public school in Montreal. By 1663, she continued her work with the Filles du Roi by using the farms she purchased on Pointe Saint-Charles to feed the poor and create a source of revenue for the church. The Filles du Roi and the Filles Mariées would come here and receive instruction on their new lives, including cooking and sewing, and the sisters would oversee the selection of the husbands. Marguerite would continue until her death, creating educational and religious institutions that would help the struggling town of Ville-Marie, which would one day become the mighty Montreal. So this is important to know because Marguerite became part of that. And for whatever reason, she was either housed there and intent on becoming a nun, or she decided, she was too young and she wanted to just stay with the congregation. We do not know. But what we do know is that she ended up getting married. So let's see who she selected. So Jean Sicot, he was born in 1632 on Dolis d'Oléron, which is part of the island of Oléron. So I wanted to show you, just so you can see that the region of France is Nouvelle-Aquitaine. It is part of the Charente-Maritime département. But further than that, look at the island. Really amazing little tiny island that is part of that département, but is obviously an island. And he was born on that island in Dolis. It has a population of about 3,200. The Église, the church where he would have been baptized, dates from the 14th century. It was badly damaged during the religious wars and rebuilt in the 17th century. So you can also see what it looks like at this kind of an aerial view of that particular town that he comes from. So that just gives you an idea of where Jean would have come from. And let's see when he and Marguerite would connect up. So a little over 3 years after she comes to New France, Marguerite and Jean are married in Montreal. So Marguerite and Jean would make their home in Montreal. Let's talk a little bit about this amazing city that started off as Ville-Marie by the founder Paul de Chomedy, Sœur de Maisonneuve, and was essentially really a missionary center when it was established in May of 1642. The colony would not thrive, and it was on the verge of extinction, really. When Chomedy decided to return to France to recruit 100 settlers, which would be known as the Grand Recruit, and as we've talked about, Marguerite Bourgeois was one of those people. Unfortunately, Montreal, being an island, was really kind of, on one level it was protected, on the other it was surrounded by water, in which case you could attack it easily. And so they always had the Indian threat. So that was part of the reason why Montreal had such a challenging time beginning. Now, by 1663, Chomedy did establish a militia, and people would volunteer to do this and were generally well rewarded for that. And the pictures that I've put on the screen really give you, on the right hand, you see Montreal as it exists today. This is old Montreal. It really is. I remember when my husband came to visit me, and we walked the city. He felt like he was in Europe. It was that special and really, really old. And that just gives you an idea of what Montreal was when it was really just Ville-Marie. So they would go on to have 2 children. Catherine, who would marry Joseph Jacques Huet, have 7 children, all of whom would make it. And Jean would marry Marie-Madeleine Lamoureux and have 7 children, all of whom would make it. He is actually the founder of the Sicard line in North America. Now you can see the 1666 and 1667 censuses where we have Jean and Marguerite and their firstborn, and then by 1667 we have Jean and Marguerite, Catherine and John. They have 4 cows and 6 arpents en valeur, so about 4 to 5 acres of land. So Jean would unfortunately pass away at the extremely young age of 44 in 1667. He died in hospital. We have to assume he was suffering from some ailment, and that is all we know, that he died suddenly. And as is always the case, not always the case, but a lot of times, one man dies and another arrives. So remember, Marguerite would have been very young to be a widow, and she would have had two young children as well. So the groom that comes forward, his name was Nicolas Boyer, and he was born in 1637. His parents were Etienne Boyer and Perrine Poineau. And he was born in Le Poiré-sur-Valuire, now called Les Valuires-sur-Vendée. He was actually a carpenter and a plowman. So he came from the Pays de la Loire, and the department would have been Vendée. This town was established around the 3rd century. It was abandoned, but ultimately was established toward the mid-centuries. The Church of Saint Nicolas was established around the 15th century, and the castle itself dates from the 14th century. So beautiful. And look at that aerial view of this place. Just amazing. It looks really, really beautiful. Only 2 months after her first husband's death, she does remarry, and she marries on the 8th of August, 1667. This is not, something that is a rare occurrence. This is very common. 2 months is a little bit of a short amount of time, but I suspect that she was in dire need of it. And certainly, would have needed someone to take care of her and her children. So let's have a look at where they go next. So they became pioneers at Verdun. In 1671, Zachary Dupri is given a fief, which is kind of like a half section of a seigneurie, next to Sault Saint Louis and Lachine. He names it Verdun after a village in his home region of France. And so one of the things that was so important in that early years of the colony was that the Governor Maisonneuve wanted protection from the Indians at the Lachine Rapid. He offered land to the men who would protect the area, and 7 men would accept. And this is why Nicolas Boyer would have accepted that and would have gotten the land here. Nicolas Boyer, in the census, you can see him with Marguerite, and we have Jacques and Jean, Paul, Marie, Nicolas, Catherine, and Jean. Now you'll notice that the ages are reversed here. All of a sudden, Catherine and Jean, from her first marriage, were at the very end. They have 1 gun. They have 8 goats. And look at how many faravalas they have. Between 24 and 25 acres, I would imagine, maybe even more, that they would have acquired. So Marguerite would die in infancy. Jacques would marry Anne Cecile and have 4 children, all of whom would make it. Jean died at 16. Paul, we are assuming he died early at 20 years of age. Marie would go on to marry Charles Gervais and have 16 children, 13 of whom made it. That's amazing. Nicolas Antoine married Louise Payette and had 8 children, all of whom made it. Marguerite Jean married Claude Caron, but I do not have any more information. Zachary married Françoise Misery, and he became an engagé out west. Does anybody have any information on that particular branch? No information. I don't have any, like who they had children or anything like that. So that's an interesting field of research. Anne-Françoise would die in infancy, and their last child, Marguerite, would marry André Sénécal and have 4 children, all of whom would make it. Nicolas would pass away at age 76. They would have been married 45 years. He died in 1714. Marguerite would last until 1733, dying at the age of an incredible 87 years of age. Just remarkable. I did want to draw your attention. This is an amazing website. Like when I studied it, I was like, wow. The Association of American Boyers. So I would assume that if your last name is Boyer, this would be your family association as well. It goes into many derivatives of that name. So have a look at that website if this is a subject for you. Absolutely amazing. Been around for over 100 years. Just phenomenal. As always, here are the resources that I use. I've got Genealogy Quebec, which is probably the #1 resource I use daily. French Canadian genealogist is one that I'm beginning to really get into. Love the website, love it, and the information and the detail. Have a look at that. If you're interested in podcasts, you can get no better than Sandra Goodwin's Maple Stars and Stripes. Truly a remarkable. And I've said it many times, she's my idol. So definitely it has inspired me in my search. I have the links to all of these, the societies and all the websites that I use, in the notes. So have a look at that. Thank you so much for watching. We are finishing up episode 12 of Marguerite Maclin. Just an amazing woman. I neglected to say in the previous slide how many descendants. 179 descendants. Truly remarkable. She kept going and gave so much to New France. Imagine she was alive when they did the study of how many descendants in 1729. So truly remarkable young lady that came early on, lived through the death of her first husband, remarried and built, and was one of the pioneers of Verdun. Absolutely inspiring. So 179 descendants. Thank you to the viewer who permitted me, who suggested this, because she really was a remarkable lady. And we thank her for her contribution. We bless her sacrifice, and we are grateful that she came to our shores. Until then, I will see you on episode 13. And until then, au revoir.